Courtrooms are built for justice, but sometimes they witness something far darker. In this video, we'll explore 5 real stories where death struck inside the courtroom itself. These were not planned endings, yet they happened in places meant to uphold the law. What should have been moments of truth turned into unforgettable scenes of tragedy, chaos, and silence that no one saw coming. It was August 13, 2004, in Nagpur, India. Around 2:30 p.m., courtroom number 7 of the Nagpur District Court began to fill with women from Kasturba Nagar, a slum on the city's outskirts. They looked like ordinary people attending a hearing, but hidden in their clothes were knives, blades, stones, and packets of chili powder. These women weren't there just to watch. They had been living in fear and pain for over a decade, and they had come for one man. His name was Bharat Kalicharan Yadav, but in Kasturba Nagar, he was known as Aku Yadav. He'd been arrested 6 days earlier, not for punishment, but for protection. That day, he was in court for a bail hearing. The rumor that he might be released had terrified the community, especially the women who had suffered most. Aku had lived in the slum his entire life. By the early 1990s, he had become a dangerous figure, leading a gang that robbed, threatened, and assaulted people openly. He forced shopkeepers to pay him, hurt anyone who refused, and made examples of families who spoke out. Starting in 1991, he and his gang began targeting women in brutal ways. Over the next 13 years, more than 40 women and girls were harmed by him, including children. Many of them were Dalits, members of India's lowest caste, who were often dismissed by police. When they tried to report him, some were mocked, ignored, or even mistreated by the officers themselves. The men didn't escape his wrath either. Aku beat and robbed shopkeepers, stabbed those who resisted, and was linked to at least 3 deaths. In one case, he disfigured a woman just to steal her jewelry. In another, he tortured a man in front of his daughter. He even attacked a pregnant woman in public. One mother, Kalma, took her own life after being attacked. Another woman, Asha Bhagat, was fatally beaten in the street. A neighbor who considered speaking out was also killed. His actions pushed the entire community into silence. Parents kept their kids inside. Vendors avoided the area. Aku even interrupted children's games, worried they were plotting against him. He bribed police with money and gifts, and in return, they protected him or warned him when someone tried to report him. Despite being arrested 14 times, he always returned. Even when banned from Nagpur in 2004, he came back. But that same year, something changed. A woman named Usha Narayani finally stood up to him. After an attack on her neighbor, she reported him. Police told Aku. He showed up at her house with acid, threatening her. But Usha lit a gas cylinder and told him she'd blow up the house if he came in. He backed off. When the neighborhood heard what she did, people began to fight back. Crowds marched. Aku's house was burned down, and he fled to the police. They arrested him, not for his crimes, but for his safety. Still, the community didn't feel safe, so when word spread that he might be released on bail, hundreds of women from Kasturba Nagar made a decision. They walked to the court, some carrying children, weapons hidden under their clothes. Aku entered the courtroom smiling. When he insulted one of the women he had hurt, calling her names and threatening her again, she stood up and hit him with her sandal. That was the moment everything changed. The women attacked. They threw chili powder, overwhelmed the police, and turned their focus on Aku. He begged for mercy, but they didn't stop. He was stabbed over 70 times. Within 15 minutes, he was dead. The women walked home and told their families what had happened. The slum celebrated with food and music. 5 women were arrested but quickly released after protests broke out. Later, charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. No blood or weapons were found on them. Authorities tried to blame 4 men, but witnesses confirmed it was the women who acted. Years later, the case inspired documentaries and films, including Indian Predator, Murder in a Courtroom, and 200 Hala Ho. There were no plans, no leaders, just people who decided they couldn't stay silent anymore. It was April 10, 2017 in Youngstown, Ohio. Inside the Mahoning County Courthouse, one of the most talked about trials in recent memory was about to begin. 48-year-old Robert Seaman Jr. was accused of seriously harming 10-year-old Corinne Gump and later ending her life along with her grandparents, William Schmidt, 63, and Judith Schmidt, 61, by setting their house on fire in March 2015. That fire had happened on the same day Corinne was supposed to testify against him. Seaman faced the possibility of the death penalty. Prosecutors believed he set the fire to keep Corinne from testifying. Though he maintained his innocence, the evidence against him was mounting. That Monday morning, Seaman appeared calm as he left a status hearing. He was dressed in civilian clothes, not handcuffed, and escorted by 2 deputies. This was routine. Courts try to avoid making defendants look guilty in front of a jury. Under his clothes, Simon wore a leg restraint to keep him from fleeing. It didn't help. Surveillance footage showed him walking quietly with the deputies. Suddenly, he slowed down, then took 3 fast steps to the side and jumped over the 4th-floor railing. It happened too fast for anyone to react. Reporter Joe Gorman from the Youngstown Vindicator witnessed the fall. He later said he saw something white drop from the railing and immediately knew what had happened. Seaman's body landed in the courthouse rotunda. Deputies rushed down to cover him with a sheet, but his arms remained visible, something many on the scene said they'd never forget. According to Sheriff Jerry Green, there were no warning signs. Seaman had been speaking normally about the trial and seemed in good spirits, but some believe the act revealed his guilt. Assistant Prosecutor Dawn Cantalamessa said it showed he knew what was coming. She added that every witness they spoke to couldn't understand why he hadn't taken a plea deal. The case itself was already disturbing. Prosecutors said Seaman had been harming Corinne since she was 4. During that time, he had been in a relationship with her mother, Lynn Schmidt. When the accusations surfaced, Lynn and Corinne moved in with her parents, William and Judith. But eventually, Lynn returned to live with Seaman. The trial was moving forward. On the same day Corinne was set to testify, a fire broke out at the Schmidts' home. It was fueled by gasoline. Firefighters later found Corinne and her grandparents' bodies on the 2nd floor. Fire Chief John O'Neill noted their positions suggested they had tried to escape but didn't make it. After his arrest, investigators found burns on Seaman's body. They believed he started the fire to prevent Corinne from testifying. He was charged with several crimes, including arson and the earlier offenses against Corinne. He had been released with electronic monitoring at the time, which raised concerns given the seriousness of the charges. Public reactions to Seaman's death were mixed. Corinne's stepmother, Lisa Capiti, said, "It's sad, there's no justice at all." But a neighbor, Jean McCammond, expressed relief, calling Seaman's death a kind of end to something terrible. The legal process had already faced delays. A mistrial had been declared earlier when a juror admitted they had already made up their mind. The new trial was moved 35 miles away to Portage County, where jury selection was set to start the day after Seaman's death. Seaman's leap raised questions about courthouse safety. While procedures were followed, and he wasn't considered a high-risk individual, the low marble railing made it easy for him to jump without warning. There was no note, no hesitation, just a quick move, and it was over. Without a trial, the families were left without answers. The footage of the incident was later released, though edited. For many, the case felt unfinished. Robert Seaman Jr.'s story ended that day, but for the families of Corinne, William, and Judith, the loss still lingers. It was March 6, 1981, in Lübeck, West Germany. The district courtroom was packed with reporters, police, and members of the public. They were there for day 3 of a widely followed trial. On the witness stand sat 35-year-old Klaus Grabowski, a man charged in the case of 7-year-old Anna Bachmeyer's death. Quietly sitting in the back was Anna's mother, Marianne Bachmeyer. She carried a small handbag. Inside it was a loaded .22 caliber pistol. Moments later, she stood up and fired 8 shots. 6 of them hit Grabowski in the back. He died instantly. To understand how it came to this, we need to go back to the previous year, May 5, 1980. That morning, Anna had an argument with her mother before school and decided not to go. Instead, she wandered around the neighborhood. Eventually, she arrived at the home of Klaus Grabowski, someone she already knew. He was a local butcher, and Anna had been to his home before to play with his cats. But Anna didn't know about his past. Years earlier, Grabowski had been convicted for harming 2 young girls. He later chose to undergo chemical castration, but reversed it through hormone treatment, regaining his physical abilities despite his record. On that day, Grabowski kept Anna at his house for hours. Then, using a pair of his fiancée's tights, he ended her life. He placed her body inside a cardboard box and left it near a canal. His fiancée reported him to the police, and he was arrested that same evening. During questioning, he confessed but gave a disturbing explanation. He claimed Anna had threatened to tell her mother something unless he gave her money, and he feared being sent back to prison. There was no proof to support that claim, but Anna was gone, and her mother was left with unimaginable grief. At the time, Marianne was a 30-year-old single mother who ran a small pub. Her 2 older children had been adopted, so Anna was her only child. Friends described Anna as bright, friendly, and full of energy. The loss devastated Marianne. When she heard Grabowski's version of events, blaming her daughter, she became overwhelmed with anger. As the trial date came closer, she became more focused on revenge. By 1981, public opinion had turned sharply against Grabowski. Many believed someone with his past shouldn't have been free. Then came March 6th. Around 10 a.m., Marianne entered courtroom 157 with a small Beretta pistol hidden in her bag. As Grabowski prepared to speak, she stood up and fired 8 shots. 6 hit him in the back. He collapsed and died on the spot. The courtroom erupted into panic, but Marianne didn't run. She calmly put down the weapon and allowed herself to be arrested. Witnesses reported she made several statements after the shooting, including that she had wanted him dead. 2 officers also claimed she used an offensive term to describe him. She was charged immediately. The courtroom had been full, and everyone saw what happened. Even the judge had watched her pull the trigger. At first, she was charged with murder, but during her trial, things took a turn. Marianne testified that she had dreams and visions of Anna in court. A psychiatric report revealed she had written a note saying, "I did it for you, Anna," with 7 hearts, 1 for each year of her daughter's life. Her defense said it wasn't a fully planned act, but prosecutors disagreed. A friend later claimed she had seen Marianne practicing with a gun before the trial. In the end, the murder charge was dropped. After 28 days in court, on March 2, 1983, Marianne was convicted of premeditated manslaughter and illegal possession of a weapon. She was sentenced to 6 years, but served only 3. Public opinion was divided. Some saw her as a broken mother acting out of pain. Others were concerned about someone taking justice into their own hands. A major magazine bought the rights to her story for 100,000 Deutsche Marks, about $158,000, which she used for legal fees. But support for her shifted after details about her past came out. In 1985, she was released early for good behavior. She later moved to Nigeria, married, then settled in Sicily after divorcing. Years later, she was diagnosed with cancer. A journalist documented her final days. She died on September 17, 1996, at age 46, and was buried next to Anna. The case of Marianne Bachmeier continues to be one of Germany's most controversial courtroom moments. Even now, it sparks difficult questions about grief, justice, and how systems respond when someone is pushed to the edge. It was March 11, 2005, in Atlanta, Georgia. Roland Wayne Barnes, a 64-year-old Superior Court judge, was scheduled to hear civil cases at the Fulton County Courthouse. Known for being kind and fair, Barnes had served as a judge since 1998 after being appointed by Governor Zell Miller. But that morning, inside a secure courtroom, something unexpected happened. 3 people lost their lives, 1 was injured, and the person responsible disappeared into the city. Judge Barnes was no stranger to challenging cases. He had recently sentenced NHL player Danny Heatley, who had admitted responsibility for a fatal car accident involving a teammate. A month before the attack, Barnes made headlines for ordering a woman who admitted to the loss of her infant to undergo a medical procedure to prevent future pregnancies. Though serious in court, Barnes had a humorous side. He often participated in courthouse skits, once even appearing in his underwear at a fundraiser. This blend of professionalism and humility made him respected by many. Barnes was born on April 25, 1940. He spent part of his youth in Germany and graduated from Lebanon Valley College in Pennsylvania in 1962, where he played backup quarterback. He later studied at George Washington University and graduated from Emory Law School in 1972. At the time of his death, he was also teaching at Emory as an adjunct professor. That morning, 33-year-old Brian Nichols arrived at the courthouse for the continuation of his trial. He was facing multiple charges from an incident the year before, including assault and possession offenses. A week earlier, his first trial ended with no verdict. Some jurors had found Nichols unsettling, describing his intense stare. Still, the courthouse was operating normally until 9:10 a.m. While being escorted by a sheriff's deputy, Nichols managed to overpower her and take her gun. He then made his way to the 8th floor, where Judge Barnes was hearing unrelated civil cases. Nichols entered the courtroom and opened fire, striking Judge Barnes and court reporter Julie Brandau. Julie, 46, had worked with Barnes for over 20 years. She was known for her warmth and regularly baked for jurors. She once said her job was never dull. Julie had an 18-year-old daughter who had just started college. After leaving the courtroom, Nichols tried to escape. Deputy Hoyt Teasley, 44, confronted him outside. Teasley, known for protecting others even as a child, was also shot and later passed away at Grady Hospital. Another deputy was wounded but survived. Panic spread through the courthouse. Staff were locked in offices. Judges stayed in their chambers. One officer said Nichols shot a deputy outside on a nearby corner. At first, some people thought the gunfire was just a car backfiring. Then the sirens started. Downtown Atlanta quickly went into lockdown. Streets were closed, workers were evacuated, and nearby schools were shut for safety. Nichols had taken a green 1997 Honda Accord from Don O'Brien, a reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. O'Brien was assaulted but survived. Law enforcement across the city and state launched a large search. Alerts went out across digital highway signs. "We need all the help we can get," said Major Edward Platt. Just weeks before, a federal judge in Chicago had lost family members in a targeted home attack, raising national concerns over courthouse safety. The legal community was in shock. Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor announced Barnes and Brandau's deaths from the Senate floor. At Barnes's home, neighbors gathered. His wife, Claudia, a judicial assistant, had been inside the courthouse when it happened. Judge Sanford Jones, who had officiated Barnes's wedding, spoke briefly to reporters, asking for privacy. Court Administrator Judith Kramer said Barnes deeply cared about people and often spoke about the value of living in America. Courthouse operations came to a halt. Every judge was shaken. Many asked how Nichols was able to get hold of a weapon in such a secure space. Later, Nichols was found and arrested at an apartment complex 25 miles away in Duluth. He was taken into custody without further violence and was later sentenced to life in prison. Judge Barnes, Julie Brandau, and Deputy Hoyt Teasley were simply doing their jobs when their lives were taken. What happened that morning shook the entire legal system and left the city with painful questions that still linger. It was June 28, 2012, in Phoenix, Arizona. Michael Marin, a 53-year-old former Wall Street trader, sat quietly in court, waiting for the jury's decision. Dressed in a suit, he looked composed, but his eyes showed he was anxious. Just minutes earlier, he had been facing up to 16 years in prison for setting fire to his own luxury mansion. The jury returned. When the foreman read the verdict, guilty, Marin closed his eyes and covered his face with his hands. Moments later, courtroom footage showed him slipping something into his mouth. He took a drink from a plastic water bottle and sat still. Minutes later, he began shaking. He collapsed and started convulsing. Paramedics arrived and rushed him to Maricopa County Medical Center, but he was pronounced dead shortly after. This was not a medical emergency. It was planned. Later that day, Marin's adult son received an email that had been pre-scheduled by his father. It included instructions about his will and where to find his car, parked in Mesa, Arizona. When investigators searched the vehicle, they found a sealed container in the trunk labeled cyanide. Although lab results were still pending at the time, everything suggested that Marin had used the substance to end his life in the courtroom. Michael Marin was born on December 2, 1958, in Oak Harbor, Washington. He was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. After high school, he attended Brigham Young University and later graduated from Yale Law School. During the 1980s and 1990s, he worked for top investment firms like Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch, and Salomon Brothers. He made a fortune working across Asia. But he wasn't just about money. He also lived an extravagant lifestyle. He owned a Rolls-Royce, flew his own plane, collected rare artwork including 18 sketches by Pablo Picasso, and went on extreme adventures. He climbed Mount Everest in 2001 and scaled the tallest mountains on 6 continents. In 2008, he bought a mansion in the upscale Biltmore area of Phoenix for $3.5 million. It was 10,000 square feet, had 4 garages, and was filled with luxury items. But that same year, the real estate market crashed. He had taken out an interest-only mortgage paying over $17,000 a month. His finances began falling apart. In early 2009, Marin tried to raffle off the mansion. He said the money would go to a charity and sold tickets for $25 each. But investigators discovered he had created a fake second mortgage with 2 associates, falsely increasing the property's debt by $950,000. This would have let him pocket around $1 million. The Arizona Attorney General shut down the raffle, calling it illegal. By mid-2009, Marin was facing a large payment of over $2 million. Then, on July 5, 2009, his mansion caught fire. Marin called 911 saying he was trapped upstairs. He escaped through a second-floor window using a rope ladder, wearing scuba gear. Firefighters found it strange. Inside, they found signs the fire had been set intentionally. 4 separate points of origin, accelerants, and phone books stacked as fuel. His valuable items had already been moved to another property. After months of investigation, Marin was arrested and charged with setting fire to an occupied building, a serious offense in Arizona. His trial began in May 2012. Prosecutors said he started the fire to get insurance money. Evidence showed Marin had bought sodium cyanide in 2011 using his credit card. As the guilty verdict was read, Marin quietly placed capsules into his mouth and drank water. Within minutes, he began convulsing and lost consciousness. Despite efforts to save him, he didn't survive. Toxicology confirmed cyanide as the cause of death. At the time, Michael Marin was a father of 4 and a grandfather of 2. What left people speechless wasn't just the outcome of the trial, but how it ended right there in court for everyone to see.